Welcome to this interview. We have seen in previous episodes that consultants and people have worked in strategy consulting have different options when they exit the strategy consulting world. We have seen in the first interview that they can start being independent consultants. In the last interview, we have seen that people start some entrepreneurial paths and then they start their own startups. But there is a third option that is open to them. That is to say, being a chief of staff. Today, I'm delighted to be here with Jared Perry, who will enlighten us with his path as being a chief of staff. But also, he has been great at combining the chief of staff role with the fractional world, with the independent consulting world. So we're going to explore these two paths together. Thank you, Jared, for being with us today.
Thanks, Gianmarco. I'm really happy and excited to be here.
Amazing. So let's start from the role of chief of staff. Chief of staff is one of the exit options that is available to strategy consultants. I myself have been a chief of staff in one of my independent consulting engagements after exiting strategy consulting. To understand more about this profession, today, I'm going to ask you some questions about what is the role, what does a chief of staff do, and we are going to explore some of the skill set that a chief of staff has to have. So let's start from the very beginning. Can you tell us, Jared, about your background and experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I must admit that I don't like talking about myself. So this is a little bit uncomfortable for me to share, but I'm really happy to. As I reflect on my previous professional experience, it's all been very kind of general and business related, and I'll kind of get into each role. But for me, that kind of highlights why the chief of staff role, why I've been really drawn to it. And also part of how now, reflecting back, I can see how different roles at these different organizations have kind of given me the skill set and given me the interest in the role. So I'll start from the very beginning, like you mentioned, Gianmarco, and go through. But the first role I had out of university was really interesting. I worked at a entrepreneurship center at St. Mary's University. So right out of the gates, I was exposed to people who had ideas that they were evaluating. I also worked with some small businesses who were kind of just getting started, and I was able to apply my business degree to kind of help them out. And the scale here, we're probably talking a couple hundred businesses over a couple of years, right? Through either training, consulting, that type of work, which was so much fun, and really kind of gave me the taste and the interest in entrepreneurship. My first role there was actually selling these grants that we had. So we had grants for small businesses. So it was basically a sales role where I pick up the phone and call businesses and try to convince them to use this grant, which is really interesting. So I get a little bit of sales experience there. There's a lot of project management involved. So I was organizing training events around the business model canvas or design thinking, and coordinating students or community members to come in with professionals, and where they would speak about these topics and learn about them over months or weekends, depending on how how the program was structured. And then the third thing there was, as I mentioned before, was like doing consulting with small businesses, small teams, and students who were getting their ideas off the ground. So really kind of exposing me to so many different business models, really kind of getting me in the weeds of their businesses, which is something that I really liked. While I was there, I went back to school and I got a master's in technology, entrepreneurship, and innovation. It's kind of like an MBA, but for startups. And so, instead of, for example, our finance class was focused around building out pro forma cash flow statements and finance strategy for startups versus corporate finance, right? So it was looking much more at kind of the details of a small business, and similarly, marketing strategy, technology strategy, all those kinds of things. How do you make your tech stack or marketing kind of work for the business model that you're trying to deploy, and all kinds of different topics around that. So you could say I'm definitely a business nerd, and that was a big part of the reason why I went back there. And then I started a business with a friend, a digital marketing agency. So I have some previous business owner experience. This is in my my mid 20s or so. So I had some experience running my own company, which I think really lends itself well to the role, especially that I'm in, where I'm working with founders. And having someone on your team who's kind of been there before and has operated a business is certainly helpful. And then, yeah, I taught at college, which I know is something we have in common. Taught at a college here in Nova Scotia on a maternity leave position, where I was teaching, creative. So it was creative industries students, so photographers, musicians, that kind of thing, teaching them once again the business model, business planning, all those types of skills. And that was kind of one of the first times in my career where I looked back and I saw the different things kind of line up, the previous training and coaching I had done, the master's degree, and then also my experience in having a business in the creative industries was kind of the first time where I was like, oh yeah, these things are starting to line up. And then from there, I was in a startup for a leadership position at a seed stage startup, B2B SaaS, working as head of service operations. And then I got my first role as chief of staff, and I was chief of staff there for 3 years. And that's really where I discovered the role, kind of fell in love with the role, and really saw, I think the thing that really opened my eyes is I saw the value that it brought to businesses at that stage and how helpful you could be to the business and to the founder who is running those businesses. And then that kind of propelled me, over the last 6 months. I've started my own business, Flow Chief of Staff, or Flowcos. And, I work as a fractional chief of staff to early stage founders. So typically founders who have the, company size between 5 to 50. They're either bootstrapped or seed stagers or Series A. Tends to be the, very early on, tends to be the type of company that I'm working with, and helping them with, different strategy, culture, and operations challenges that they have as they grow. So yeah, that's how it's all lined up.
Absolutely. And just to clarify, after how many years then have you embarked on your first chief of staff role?
Yeah, so it has been about 4 years, 3.5 to 4 years since
Okay.
I had my first chief of staff role. Yeah.
And how many years of work experience did you have when you started your chief of staff role?
Yeah, when I started, I probably had about 6 or 7,
Okay.
I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, probably
Cool.
6 or 7. Yeah.
Okay, this is a very good segue into the next question, which is the fact that the chief of staff role is not well known everywhere, right? And also where it is more widespread, I'm talking about the US or the UK even, it's not really fully understood. So can you tell us what is a chief of staff?
Yes, I'm happy to. It's a bit of a loaded question, because depending on who you talk to and who you ask, I think
Yeah.
you're going to get different answers, of course. But I'm really happy to share it kind of from my perspective and working with early stage companies. So, for me, it's really working with early stage founders who need support in kind of three main areas. So they're starting a business. They have some core leadership or some core team members in place who are owning kind of different results, but there's gaps that exist in the business as it grows or shrinks, or different kind of major events happen, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit later. And so really what the role comes down to at this stage company is, on a high level, it's kind of 3 main things. It's culture, strategy, and operations. And I think, on the strategies, it kind of all starts with the strategy, really, right? What is the company strategy? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we doing this quarter? What are we not doing this quarter? And then who's responsible for those things? How are we making sure those things are getting done? And how are we tracking those to make sure that they're on track, essentially, right? So that's a strategy piece, and that's a lot for a founder to do. Amongst growing product and building product and selling, right? Typically, because typically they would also oversee those, unless they have a different. Of course, it does depend on the executive that they have and co-founders they have, but that's the case that I've seen the most. So that's that on the strategy side. On the operations side, it is like making sure that the right people are talking to each other and facilitating those conversations, or making sure that cross-functional projects are getting done. And on the culture side, for me, it's been more on the kind of coaching, mentoring piece, and it is about running the HR function. I have done, I think that it also kind of depends on the what's required at each business, but to some degree it is like running parts of the HR function. It could be, or it could be more just managing or coaching managers to help them hit those goals that were described through the company strategy. So that is my take on what a chief of staff does in an early stage company.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And when do companies or founders, in your specific case, need a chief of staff?
Yeah, great question. I would say, the first indicator is when things are, falling through the cracks, which is a very general statement, but things are starting to slip, things are starting to fall through the cracks. I don't want to drill too far into what that means, but basically if you're a founder leading an organization, you'll start to feel when you're not getting things done that need to be getting done in order to hit your milestones that you've set out to tell either your investors that you're going to hit, or in relation to your company strategy. And then specifically, like some things that I've seen, I got a little list here that I'll run through, but the inflection points are like major transformations. So it could be a change in business model, like a pivot, where that's going to take a lot more time, and you might need some help making sure that everyone's aligned. It could be a rebrand. I think I've been a part now of like 4 or 5 rebrands as a chief of staff. It's just like a very pivoting and rebranding can be more common, I suppose, in the earlier stages as you're figuring out. I typically don't work with companies that are pre-product market fit, but some are like establishing that and trying to figure that out. So there are, and founders will need some help during those times. The other obvious one is team size is fluctuating. It's going up, it's going down. The other one I've seen too is a key team member or key team members leaving the company. So there's new gaps, and there's an opportunity there to restructure and rethink how things are being done. And then, of course, the other thing would be bringing on a chief of staff around fundraising. If you're raising funds, if you're a venture-backed company, either typically before the fundraising starting, or as you're getting your funds, so you're able to execute on your strategy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what skills would you say that a chief of staff has to have in order to succeed in this role?
Yeah, I would say, one of the biggest changes I've seen is, it's not a hard skill, but emotional intelligence is really important. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be working with so many different people that you have to be able to, you have to be able to work with them on a, kind of more of a soft skills level and basis. General business knowledge is one we've already talked about a little bit, but knowing business models, knowing sales, marketing, HR, operations, different business functions, finance. Not that you have to run all those, but you have an understanding of how all those things flow and how they all relate to the business model is helpful. I think very helpful for anyone who's working with a founder. I would say understanding business strategy, right? So obviously understanding where's the business going, how does my role contribute to that? And then how does everyone else's role contribute to that? And how can I get them aligned and working towards that? Being detail oriented and organized is important, of course, as well. Being able to think critically. So thinking through a situation, playing it out is important. And I would say, a couple last ones here, remaining calm under pressure. There's a lot of these can be high pressure situations, or there's stakes on the line. And it's important to be able to just kind of remain calm and be kind of a bit of a grounding source for team members, for the founders you're working with. And then the last one I'd say too is like just communications in general. So written communications, verbal communications, being able to just succinctly boil down like what is happening without giving a whole, basically knowing what information is important and sharing that, but also understanding the reasoning behind a report or communications that you're giving. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So for those that are listening to us, if they feel or perceive that the chief of staff is a role that they want to pursue, how can they develop skill set of a chief of staff in roles that are not chief of staff?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think like the way I would approach this is, I'd look at my current situation, what role am I in, right? And then you could look at job descriptions that are out there around chiefs of staff and companies that you'd be interested in joining, or company size, whatever it is. And then kind of I would look at reverse engineering it and seeing what are the opportunities in my current role where I could take on something that I'm not currently doing. So let's say you're a project manager. Maybe there's a way that you could help out with strategy or something like that. I don't know, but I would start to try to have those conversations as much, if that's available to you at the organization you're at. And once again, I'm thinking, of course, smaller businesses where they're going to need all the internal help they can get. But I guess what I'm getting towards is trying to find those ways that you could look at a job description and identify the gaps, and then start to think about, well, how could I gain those skills in my current position? And then if that's not available to you, maybe thinking about something like portfolio projects that you could take on. Is there like a small business that you could help with, a skill that you don't have yet, but you understand it?
Yeah. I have personally seen many different strategy consultants transition from strategy consulting to chief of staff roles. But the background of chief of staff in general is varied, right? It can come from many different positions. In your opinion, what roles best prepare for a transition to a chief of staff role?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think it's going to be varied. I think, coming from the strategy consulting side, one of the ones that I think would be super helpful is someone who's worked in business transformation to some degree, because I think that entails a lot of these aspects we're talking about, like especially the cross functional piece. Someone, even if you've worked in startups as in one of the operational roles, that's going to be super helpful, because especially in a smaller team, you'd have a lot more context into different positions. Anyone who's been a COO at a startup that's gone out of business or failed, or has really good experience in growing teams previously would lend themselves really well to the role. And I think the most important piece, though, is that you need to complement the principal, or in my case, the founder that I'm working with. Really complement them and their skill sets, right? They're going to have good hard skills that they bring to the position, and you should have some complementary ones that you would bring in.
So, what advice could you give to someone that is thinking to become a chief of staff?
I would first identify, like, what is it about the position that you like or that you want, right? Start there, and then start looking at some job descriptions that are out there around the role, and then identifying, what gaps you have, and then start to try to build those skill sets to get you closer to it. That'd be my advice.
So far, we have talked about being a chief of staff, let's say, in a full-time position, but you actually have started up a business where you are a fractional chief of staff. So you work for different companies depending on their needs, on 2 or 3 days a week. What is the additional skill set that you need to have in order to be able to be a fractional chief of staff?
Yeah, I would say, like, there's kind of three main things that stick out to me. The first is, like, being really clear on where the founder and the business needs you the most, right? So prioritizing. So that is one of the interesting things about when you're fractional, really prioritizing the things that are, of top priority. Versus just doing a little bit of everything, and maybe some tasks or some projects that are of lower value. I think that's one of the nice things that the role brings out, and just being really clear on that. From a fractional standpoint, it's important to set expectations just around when you're going to be available, how you're going to be available, the types of things you can work on. But really, that's going to come down to, keeping open communication and having really good relationship with the founders that you're working with. That's like the most important thing. Regular touch points, being open, being honest, being trustworthy, and just making sure that you're able to progress your working relationship with them as the business progresses.
Let's talk about AI, right? And from 2 points of view. First of all, how a chief of staff can embrace AI in order to make their job better, faster, or more efficient. And from the second point of view, if AI will ever be able to replace the role of a chief of staff. What would you say about this?
The first part around, how it enables a chief of staff, I would say there's a couple of ways that I use AI. The first is making meeting notes. So that's the first thing. And I have a tool where I can go in and I can prompt it and ask things like, what were the action items coming out of this meeting? which is very helpful for me. So I can track that, because coming back to cross-functional things, those are important to know specifically. So that's one use case for me. And then the other one would just be around double checking my thought process, or finding gaps in what I think. So putting on the second point around replacing, I don't think that it could replace the chief of staff completely. I think that there's going to be a lot of different needs for a chief of staff, including the emotional intelligence piece that I talked to you about. A lot of it, a lot of things in business is still people doing work, and you have to be able to interact with people. So on that case, I think that is, that's important to note. But I do think there's going to be a lot of ways that AI will be able to enhance and enable chiefs of staff to be more efficient and to save time, including the couple of use cases that I mentioned to you. But there's probably going to be many more use cases that will evolve.
In terms of day rates or the business model that you use in order to price your services, can you tell us more about that, so that people that want to undertake this path can take some inspiration?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, just to preface this is very, very new for me as well, and I'm still kind of figuring out my own business model. But when I started, I basically worked back from a couple data points. I looked at what is the salary of a chief of staff, and then I also tried to build in what's the added value I could add into that, right? So understand that I work with different companies and have exposure to a lot of different problems, which would only add more value to the business that I'm working with. So I kind of started there, and then I also looked personally at what I needed to be making. And the model, there's a lot of different ways you could do this. You could do day rate, hourly rate, retainer model. And so what I started with was a retainer model, because I think that a couple of reasons, but one, you're going to get more business context. You're ingrained in the team. You get to know the people. You're exposed to a lot of the different issues in the business, and that's going to only make you better over time. It's also a little bit more stable from a money income perspective. And so that is basically how I carved mine out, was like, a day a week, couple of days a week, 2.5 days a week, that kind of thing. But also just trying to get a better understanding of like, what is the scope that each company is gonna need, right? So just started with retainer because it was going to be simpler and a little bit more predictable from an income perspective for me. And then also understanding that that's going to be a positive for the business, because I'm going to get to understand their context better, and they can plan for how much it's going to cost them.
And just for people that are not familiar with this business model, retainer means that you have a series of clients that pay you a fixed fee, and you can deliver work for them. But then if there is additional work, I think, add up, the days that you work on that. Is that
That's right.
correct? Or do you want to clarify?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Jared, for giving us all this information. I'm going to share in the description below your contact details, also the link to Flowcos. So if people are interested to collaborate with you, they can reach out to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, it's been great to be here. And yeah, if anyone has questions or wants to follow up, would love to connect. I really do think that the future is going to be more fractional, more kind of solopreneurs adding value to businesses. And so I'd be happy to connect with others who are starting to go down this journey.
Okay, amazing. Thank you.